Welcome everyone to this panel discussion, which is organized by the RESES project, which is rethinking the serviceability of economics to society. This project is funded by the Finnish Cultural Foundation. I am Emrah Aydinonat, and I am a philosopher of economics working at the University of Helsinki. And my goal today is to make things clear about the debates concerning the home care allowance system. There's a lot of news articles being published about that. There's policy discussions. So the aim is to make things clear and also research, like we will do a research-based discussion about that. Now I will introduce our panelists who kindly agreed to be here today. We have Tuomas Kosonen, who is a research professor at VATT Institute for Economic Research. We have Maiju Paananen, associate professor at the Faculty of Education and Culture at Tampere University. We have Elina Pekkarinen, who is an Ombudsman for children in Finland, and then adjunct professor at the University of Helsinki. We have Essi Rentola, who is the Director General at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, Department for Insurance and Social Security.
Only director, not
Only
director general.
I'm sorry, director. And then we have Aino Saarinen, who is a lecturer at the Department of Psychology at the University of Helsinki. So to start the discussion, I would like to ask a very basic question and start with Essi. What is this thing called home care allowance system people are discussing about?
Okay, thanks. Well, I think it's you have to start with the whole early childhood education system in Finland. So, but it's part of the whole care system of children, and Finland introduced already in the 80s, and it became a subjective right in 1996 for all children under school age to have a place in public daycare in Finland. But Finland has always wanted to give options for families. So if your child is not in this municipal daycare, or actually maybe the right translation at the moment is early childhood education service in Finland, then you have a right to home care allowance if the child is taken care of at home. And the caretaker can be the parents or someone else. And then there is a basic amount of the care allowance, which is 340 euros a month, and then there is a care supplement, which is 180 euros, which is dependent on the income of the family. And then in addition to that, municipalities can decide to provide for a municipal supplement. So these are the basic things for the home care allowance, and you can get it for until the child is 3 years of age, and it's after the parental allowance period has ended when you start getting the home care allowance.
Okay, thank you very much. I have this question: what were the expected benefits of this home care allowance system, and what are the benefits people are thinking about nowadays when they think about home care allowance? So when this was being designed?
Yeah, well, I'm probably not the best expert to talk about all the history of the home care allowance. I'm sure there are better experts here, but it's the early discussions started already in the end of 1940s as a idea of a woman's pay or women's salary, and it was the labor organizations in Finland, the social partners who started with it, and mostly at that, the first initiators were the like from the labor force, but then afterwards it also became a priority for the rural party, or the center party as it's named today in Finland. And but then it was introduced in mid-1980s, and my understanding is that the idea was that you should give the option for families to choose, and also there were, if I've understood correctly, this notion of that the best place for the child under 3 years of age, or a very good place to take care of a child under 3 years of age, is home, and so that might be one of the issues behind. And then I've learned that like the golden age of the home care allowance was the beginning of the 1990s, when we had this deep recession in Finland. So then it became very popular, and yeah, well, this is basically what I know, but probably there are, you researchers probably know more.
Maiju, would you like to add something?
Yeah, sure. Very good explanation. See,
Okay,
so it was Social Democratic Party first in the 40s who have suggested that, okay, maybe we should have this kind of, they called it mother's pay, äitipalkka in Finnish. So there was kind of this slight, maybe leaning towards kind of feminist idea of like recognizing also the labor females are doing. Thank you. So what kind of women are doing at home. But as Essi mentioned, it also has become a very important tool for municipalities to save money. So this is a very strong rationale for municipalities to introduce, for example, municipality supplements. So municipalities can top up the national level allowance and give municipal level supplements, and around maybe 60 municipalities do so currently. It's been shifting and changing during the years, so how many municipalities give this additional supplement, and it can be a maximum of 350 euros on top of the basic level supplement, and if you have more children, it can be more than that, obviously. So so those are the kind of main rationalities for providing it from the point of view of policy makers. But of course, like that discourse of choice has always been there. So it's been a compensation for people not to use early childhood education services, municipal early childhood education services, and also ensuring that if parents wish so, they have the opportunity to take care of the children at home. And this is also related to kind of childhood poverty. So it's been kind of a way to ensure that people will have enough money to survive.
Elina?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've understood that in the 80s it was mostly a discussion in between the Central Party and others that, I don't know, they did some changes in the working mothers' support, and they wanted to give something for the mothers that were working in the agriculture to stay at home. And the whole idea sort of broke down in the 90s with the recession and the big cities beginning to pay for the municipal supplement. So it has sort of changed a lot from the history, but still, though the small municipalities in the north and northwest use the home care allowance more than other municipalities or the parents living in those. So it still seems to be something that the people working in the agriculture use.
Tuomas?
Yeah, about the municipal supplements, they were actually becoming to be quite popular towards the end of the 80s, and in the recession in the early 90s began. Then municipalities seemingly didn't have enough. They need to save from somewhere, so they scrapped most of them. So there were only 5 municipalities left.
Really?
In early 90s that paid the supplement, and then it sort of the fact that we are also utilizing in the study, they started to become more and more popular then again during the 90s and the early 2000s. And yeah, I will show soon maps where you can see where the supplements are in different years.
I have one question about this municipality supplement. So what is the exact rationale? Why are they giving the supplement? Can you explain?
Well, there's no one single explanation. So Maiju mentioned that they might want to save money. So the rationale for that for them is to pay the supplement in order to encourage children away from public daycare, which is costly for them to organize. If you then do the math, it might not actually work that way because then you need to pay the supplement for also for all mothers who have stayed at home care anyway. So you might end up paying a lot more supplements than you save from the few people who switch because of the supplements. But there's when I originally started to collect this data on municipal supplements, actually already back in 2007 when I was a PhD student, and then continued keeping collecting them. But I tried to also look at the minutes of the municipal councils who had made the decisions. So there were lots of quite random different kind of considerations that led to them to either implement or not implement the supplements. I also have tried to kind of look whether they correlate between average income in the municipality or kind of political lineation, but that also doesn't typically lead anywhere. So it's kind of difficult actually to explain why. There's many reasons why they.
Okay, so I was thinking it's only economic, but there are more reasons.
I mean, what they talked earlier about the political alignments, it's the center party nowadays that mostly wants to pay this, but then if you look at municipalities, like most, of course, it used to be such that in municipal countries across Finland, most of the municipalities are controlled by the center party, so there's not much barriers in there. But if you look at changes in vote shares to some other parties, they still might propose these supplements, even if they are not from center party. So it's not very clear, but there might be still some political reasons which are not just clearly correlated with parties. So kind of ideological reasons for paying supplements on top of the economic reasons.
Okay, thank you. So to clear things up a little bit more, and then we will move to the research. I would like to ask, I'm seeing a lot of news articles, commentaries on the home care allowance system nowadays. And as a foreigner living in Finland, I'm trying to understand why is this being discussed so intensely now. Could you perhaps, all of you, provide a perspective on that, and then maybe also tell us what is missing from the discussion? Maybe I would like to start with Aino.
Actually, I have one thing to add with this history of this daycare system. When I was reading a book about childcare system in the US, so an American book, and And actually the original background of this daycare system lies in the ethnical groups, because the original idea was that children from black families need to be cared by white children. So actually that's the earliest origin of this system that I have been able to find. And of course this is now very different in Finland, because we don't think about such ethnic groups and etc. But then you asked why this is so hot topic in Finland. I think that this is the most like private thing in people's life, because this concerns home environment and family dynamic systems, and also we have, I think that this is not the only topic, but every time we discuss something very private, whether it's mental health or psychotic symptoms or depression or anything, then we like have strong emotions.
Well, I think that the reason why it's talked so much today is that our society is finally kind of having a look at which are the like obstacles for people to combine family and work life. And one of the challenges is that men and women are not in the same labor market position. Women still have hinders in their labor market, and one of the reasons is that they take care more of their children. And like I have these statistics that even today 90% of the home care allowance is taken by women. So I think this is like a shift in the thinking that we really have to consider the reconciliation, or like the combining family and work life, and that both mothers and fathers will have a right to take care of their children, and how to give incentives to families to choose or give the possibility to both parents, irrespective of their gender. And then I think this was a big discussion also during when the parental allowance legislation was changed, and it came into force in August. And there was this lot of debate about shouldn't women have the right to keep the whole parental allowance period to themselves? And so now actually it's kind of a compromise of that. But I think it's a change, and if we compare with other Nordic countries, there is still a difference in Finland about how women's role in taking care of children is considered. This is my personal view, I must say, but that's how I feel, that this is the reason why it now has come into the debate. It's about equal treatment and combining work and family life in a new way. And then also the fact that we can see those statistics or research show also the negative impact that the home care allowance has for segregation in society. And one of the maybe most negative impact is the situation of migrant women, that it's an obstacle, or it can be seen as an obstacle for migrant women to integrate into the labor force in Finland. And migrant women is a very large group of people, very different backgrounds and so on. But yeah, well, long explanation, but this was a very maybe personal view.
Thank you. Elina, what's your perspective on this?
I think Essi's and Aino's answers were perfect. I think it's about policies, culture, and values that are connected in this issue. When it comes to mothers working, I must say that when you compare OECD countries, Finnish mothers do full-time work more than in many other, more than in the medium of OECD countries, so I'm not too worried about that. But when it comes to the immigrant women, I think it's interesting that we always bring up this topic, because you said, Aino, it has nothing to do with ethnicity, but I think in the Finnish discussion, it has everything to do with the ethnicity, because we always start to talk about the women that have moved here from foreign countries that do not learn the language, and we have to be worried about them. I always try to take the other side of the policy into the discussion, which are the children and the children's right to be taken care of by their parents. And there I always want to say that when we look into the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it states that it is the primary responsibility of the parents to take care of their children, and the responsibility of the state is to support the parents in doing that. And yes, I know in Denmark there has been this really strong pressure to take the children into early education system from the age of 10 months, because they think that to become a good Dane, you have to take part into this Danish institution. But I am a little bit afraid that this is sort of a very, very, how could I say it nicely? Well, maybe I won't say it. But I think it's one side, yes, but if we want to respect the family's right to take care of their own child and the child to be taken care of his or her parents, then I think that we should allow whoever to stay at home and take care of the child, whether it is the father or the mother. Yes, I'm sorry to say it, very often it's the mother, but that is the choice of the families as well, and it doesn't seem to affect too much the mother's working career.
I know you have an immediate point on that.
Yes, I think Elina's talk was perfect, and I would like to emphasize here that when we are talking that Finnish mothers are not at work and it's a concern and we need to change it, it's really true that in Finland we have basically two options, full-time work or full-time home. And if we look at the statistics, we can see that in many other countries, mothers can have, for example, 5 hours of work per week, 10 hours of work, 15, 20. In Finland, it's typically 40 hours of work or nothing. And so if we look at the only percentages that, okay, in some other country, the children, a larger proportion of children are in center-based care, it's not the whole truth, because they are shorter days there. They may be, for example, 2 or 4 hours per day, but in Finland, children are longer days there, and this must be taken into consideration.
Yes, and I have to add to that why it is such a hot potato here, is the fact that our early education system is not doing too well. So parents feel that they are forced to take their child into care where the quality is not too good and the children are not safe. And this is particularly the problem in the big cities that actually pay for the municipal supplement. Now I remember that. And I think it has probably, I don't know, this is my comment to the article as well, that we should probably look into the quality of the daycare and the opportunity to get professionals to work in the early education system before we have to put too much blame on the home care allowance system. But from the point of view of the children, the hours in early education in Finland are really long compared to other countries. And especially when you look into the children that are lower than 3 years of age, being apart from their parents for such long hours every day, particularly in groups where they don't know the adults that are taking care of them, that's not in the best interest of the child.
Okay, thank you, Maiju.
I'm very happy to continue from here, and I do agree that we tend to have this very dichotomous idea of this issue. So it's either home care or early childhood education and care. And this is, of course, because of the policy. So you need to choose between those options. And it has this historical background we just discussed. And I'm now kind of turning to the question you posed, so why this is such a hot topic. So I think this is one of the most loved allowance or kind of support systems in Finland, and it's kind of very, very used. So almost all the families use it. So and as Aino said, I agree that it's something that is kind of felt that this is intimate, somehow intimate, and now it kind of becomes a public policy, and there is this resistance. And I would like to kind of bring to the discussion firstly that we have 309 municipalities, if I remember correctly, currently, which are very, very different environments for organizing the whole system. So you can, for example, imagine that we have municipalities in archipelago, Saaristo. It's a very different environment to organize the whole early childhood education system compared to Helsinki city center. Or we have municipalities in rural areas where distances to services are rather long. So this is something I'd like to bring to the discussion as well. And the other thing is the segregation, which Essi mentioned already, but from the point of view of children. So our current system tend to kind of organize the early childhood education and care parts from kind of for different children differently. So children from different socioeconomic background tend to enter very different early childhood education and care paths. And we know from the French research in school-age children that this segregation is very harmful for certain children. So this is something I think we need to take into consideration.
Thank you. So I'm guessing that all these points will come up later on when we are discussing the research. So maybe we should just give the floor to Tuomas, who has research on this topic, home care allowance and its effects on mothers and also children. So Tuomas, please introduce us to your research and its results. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think one aspect of why it's a hot topic is that many people have very strong opinions on the topic, and also the kind of on the what are the effects of the whole system. So maybe it's good to try to understand what are truly the effects when studied objectively. So I'm introducing this fresh research paper, Paying Moms to Stay Home, the effect of home care subsidies on mothers and children, which precisely tries to do that, is to study what is the kind of causal impact of this home care allowance system on first on mothers' choices, to whether it influences mothers' choices to take care of their children at home, or whether it's just an income transference to mothers who would have liked to stay home with their children anyway. And then to study what if we find kind of impacts in the first stage on the form of care choices, then what's the impact of that on mothers' longer-term work careers, and crucially, what's the impact of these choices on children? So the paper is joint work with John Gruber, who's professor at MIT, and Kristiina Huttunen, who's professor at Aalto University. So I mentioned that we want to study the causal effect of home care allowance, and kind of meaning separating that from all the other things that might influence people's choices to place their children in home care or place them children in daycare, early education. But there's if we want to just compare children or mothers who stay at home care or children and mothers who are in daycare, there's kind of a challenge for identifying the causal effect of the form of care and separate that from other things. I want to try to highlight here what is at the core of the problem. So what we ideally want to do if we want to do this comparison and separate kind of the role of form of care, we would like to compare Kurna, the same kid at the same age, who's either at home care or in daycare. Because the child is the same, and the form of care is the only difference between in this situation, then we would maybe find out by comparing bunch of Kurnas in home care and daycare, what is the role of or the kind of causal impact of care on or Kurna's parents on number of outcomes. But the real life situation, if we want to look at kids who are in home care and compare them with kids who are in daycare, is that we might be comparing Kurna with Ruska. Kurna in home care with Ruska in daycare. And as you can see from the picture, Ruska looks much smarter than Kurna. And that sort of poses this problem now, because now we are not only comparing home care with daycare, but we are also comparing Kurna with Ruska. And because they are different, we are not knowing, even if the children then have different later outcomes, or if their children, if their parents' working careers develop differently, we don't know whether this was because of the form of care or because we are just comparing different kind of people. So how we then try to overcome these challenges to study the home care allowance system. Here is kind of child age timeline. So we are not focusing on the maternity benefits that you get right after birth, but rather the home care allowance period, which is marked at slightly darker red here. I come right back to the supplements that we utilize to overcome the challenge. The timeline also tries to highlight that we look at children who and their parents who are at 1 year old. And then we look at what happens to these children depending on their what kind of policy they are facing when they are 1 year old later. So we, for example, have early cognition tests at age 5 or schooling and youth crime outcomes 16-year-old, or also the moms or working career for many years afterwards. So that's the kind of idea what we want to do in a timeline. So about the municipal supplements, I promised to Elina to show a map. So here's a map of Finland, 4 different maps of Finland, 1905, 98, 2001, and 2005. So as you can see, there were in 95 very few municipalities, kind of after the recession, that wanted to pay municipal supplements. They are marked in red in the map. Then they started to become in 98, 2001, and 2005. You each time have more red dots in the map, meaning that you have more municipalities that have the supplement. You also notice that the supplements are sort of in different places in Finland, so they are not concentrated in one particular area. You can't see from the map, but I can say that there's different kinds of municipalities that have supplements. So there's always the Helsinki, biggest city, but there's also smaller municipalities that have the supplement. And in the group that never have supplement policies in this period, you have, for example, from bigger cities, Turku and Tampere, that we can sort of compare with Helsinki, but there's also a lot of smaller municipalities that we can compare with the smaller municipalities that don't have a supplement policy. So having supplement policies is not sort of in immediate way kind of to do with what kind of municipalities they are. So the idea is then to take a municipality that, say, here, that doesn't have supplement policy in 98, but has a supplement policy in 2001. And look, on average, all children in that municipality, and compared to the neighboring municipality that doesn't have supplement in either of those years. So if we take all children in all the municipalities that experience supplement changes, there's on average enough kurnas and ruskas in all municipalities that the children on average are similar in those municipalities. And if their outcomes then change precisely for those kids who experience supplement changes when they were 1, compared to the other children in other municipalities that don't face these changes, we can say that the changes in those outcomes, like the early cognition test or youth crime, are caused by the supplement policies. So then, in this way, we can overcome the identification challenge I was talking about. And there's a big set of other assumptions that we in economics take care to look at that need to be fulfilled in order for us to say that we are convinced that we are looking at causal effects of the policy, but I can assure you that in the 85 pages that is our manuscript that we have done a lot of those checks. So here's the result on, so the question that was posed early on was that, okay, so if we implemented this home care allowance system just to make sure that there's also some kind of subsidy for moms who say in agriculture are staying at home, then the idea might have been that it doesn't influence maternal employment at all. So it doesn't influence moms' working decisions, and on the other side of the coin, whether or not they stay at home taking care of their child. But this is the result that shows otherwise, that increasing the home care allowance through these municipal supplements, the monetary amount you get per month clearly reduces maternal employment when the child is 1 year old. So how the graph is constructed is, here we compare moms who have a 1 year old child in municipality that will implement the supplement policy in year 0, and we look at first how these moms in these municipalities, how their employment develop compared to all the other municipalities that don't have change in supplement policy. And we see first here that they develop quite similarly in their employment. So then the municipality introduces the supplement, and in the same year the maternal employment declines. And then the municipality might have the supplement policy in place, and the maternal employment stays at a lower level in those municipalities that now have the supplement policy. So this is, I think, as an economist, I think this is pretty convincing evidence that the monetary amount of the home care allowance really influences maternal employment in a negative way. And then we look at number of other outcomes in the study that I don't, in my short time, go too deeply into. But this is the kind of result that tries to put this result into context that maybe is easier to understand. So I first need to explain what is the black line. The black line here is something that in the economics literature is called child penalty, and it's constructed in a way that on the horizontal axis you have the birth of the first child in years. And then the black line is how is the mom's earnings developing surrounding the birth of the first child compared to father's earnings. So this is precisely about the gender equality or inequality in this case. And this is just calculated from all mothers that are born in Finland in over almost 30 years period. So it's kind of very in full population data, so it means that it's very representative of what truly happens. And what this shows is that the earnings of moms dip very low relative to fathers, but sort of more also varying, so they dip slightly below 70% here, but it's also varying that they sort of rise to some kind of long run average level very slowly, and this represents quite big sort of loss in earnings for moms relative to dads. And then the sort of long run level of child penalty of about -20% is something that is found, for example, in Denmark. But Denmark doesn't have this huge dip in early years. So then the red dots is something that we constructed based on our estimates that I just explained how the municipal supplements or the monetary amount of home care allowance affects employment and especially labor earnings in this figure. But we have multiplied those estimates by 5 and deducted them from the child penalty. So by 5, because the average amount of home care allowance people receive is around 500 euros. So this is kind of a thought experiment of how the child penalty might look like if we didn't have home care allowance system. And then this result suggests that especially this kind of very big dip would sort of disappear, and maybe we would have more like Danish kind of child penalty which sort of in the short run is on the same level as in the long run of about 20%. I have to emphasize that this is kind of extrapolation, so its point is more extrapolation of a point estimate. So the point here is more to illustrate what kind of scope how large are point estimates, how large sort of changes in inequality between parents' earnings and they can imply, and I would say that it looks pretty large. So we also importantly looked at how with the same supplement policy changes, how the supplements receiving 100 euros larger home care allowance through the municipal supplements, how they might affect children. And here are the early cognition tests, or specifically failing rate on average in these early cognitive tests that are done at child health clinics at age 5 or 4, mostly at age 5 in our observation period. two different series, just constructed in a slightly different way, but they both convey the same result, which is that when again there's kind of nothing in pre-period, and when the municipality implements the supplement policy, the children on average in that municipality start to fail these cognitive tests more often. So this is a negative impact on children. So I don't want to take too much time from the discussion, so I just present the other results we have as a quick summary. So for mothers, the outcomes are clearly negative in the short and long term. When the child is 1 year old, the employment and labor earnings decline, and also kind of confirming the first stage is that home care allowance usage increases. Also in the longer term, mom's employment, earnings and income decline. So we have a kind of longer term negative impact on mothers' careers. I also want to explain that we did look at fathers, but they used the home care allowance so little that it wasn't enough observations to do meaningful statistical analysis. So that's why I explain all the time the effect on mothers. So as I just explained, the monetary variation in home care benefits can also explain a large share of the short-term child penalty, which speaks that the home care allowance system affects also gender equality between parents. So for children, the effects, the main findings are that we find more fails on average in early cognitive tests when children receive higher or the family receives higher home care allowance when the child is 1 year old. Children also enroll less often in academic high school and instead enroll to vocational secondary education or even drop out entirely. Then we also find that youth crime on average in those municipalities increase that have implemented supplement policies. But I want to emphasize also that this is from a low base, so the average youth crime rate is 4%. I don't know if you want to take that as a low or high, but it's 4%, and then the effect of this 100 euros per month more supplements is 0.5 percentage point. So it's kind of in relative terms, it's not a small effect, but it's not. I don't want to give a picture that because of this system, all the children do crime or something like that. So, but it's still also a kind of negative impact on some children. All right, that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the news articles about your research say that home care allowance is bad for mothers and bad for children. But if I understand the research correctly, you are looking at the municipal supplements, and the effect is like with the increased municipal supplement, you have this kind of effect. So how confidently can we say that it is the base home care allowance system that's causing these things, or the additional incentive provided by the municipalities? That would be my first clarificatory question, and then I will give the word to our panelists.
Yes, so what we ourselves have said is that we are looking at the effect of the monetary amount of home care allowance, and we think that the municipal supplements are mostly just that they are variation in the monetary amount of home care allowance, because in most municipalities you get them, you apply for them by ticking the same box in the same format that you use for applying home care allowance in the first place. So if you just happen to live in a municipality, you in the end receive more of the home care allowance. So I'm quite confident that we are speaking about variation in monetary amounts of home care allowance. Then you can make thought experiment that what if the monetary amount is 0? But that's of course an extrapolation of from our point estimates.
Okay, so it's better that the news articles talk about the additional monetary incentives rather than the full home care allowance system. Is that correct?
I think they can speak about the home care allowance in a sense of when they speak about money, but then from the whole parental leave system, there's another element which we haven't studied, which is that you have this guarantee that you can return to the same job you had, provided you had a job and the job or the firm still exists. But so that's additional element that can amplify the effects of this system that we haven't studied. So in that sense, we haven't studied the whole system.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with your questions and comments. Perhaps you would like to start with clarificatory questions and then also comment on the research, how you perceive it, what kinds of perspectives it might be missing in your from your own perspective and expertise. So let's start with Aino, please.
Okay, I have some questions for you, so can I present them? Okay, thanks. So first of all, thanks for the presentation. I would like to ask you that I was actually reading your publication. It's quite long, and I tried to read it quite exactly. I have such a question that if I understood correctly, you didn't control the analysis for father's income or home income or father's education or parents' criminality, previous criminality, because we know that if a child comes from a family with low income or criminality, then he or she is more likely to have criminality also in adulthood, independently of he or she is at home or in some center-based care. So this is my first question.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
Quick answers,
okay,
please.
So quickly, this is precisely what I tried to explain with the Kurna and Ruska example with the maps, that if you take a lot of children in different municipalities, you have different families that, for example, have this different criminality background in those municipalities that take up the supplement and in the other municipalities. So this kind of quasi-experimental method takes this kind of variation in backgrounds by definition into account.
Okay, I had just a further question, because I saw that below some of the tables you mentioned that you had adjusted the analysis for mother's education or mother's age. Did I understand correctly? So
yes.
My question is that why did you not add, for example, father's income or father's education?
Yes, we included some control variables. We tried to use precisely, for example, education, because that's kind of predetermined. Incomes are sort of, we think that we didn't want to use them because there's danger that they're sort of endogenous, meaning that they are somehow co-varying with the outcome we are studying. But I can tell you that in this kind of setting, the control variables do not significantly change the point estimates, but they might reduce the confidence intervals a little bit. So they make the estimates more precise. But individual level controls should not, and in our case, it's maybe good check that they did not affect the estimates. So we didn't want to pour in like kitchen sink controls. We just wanted to use something like sensible, predetermined ones.
Thanks. I also a few short questions, so I will not consume much time with my questions. Another question is that you didn't report here this how big proportion, so R squared, R toiseen selitysaste. So how much did the models explain from the variation, for example, in criminality? Because when I was reading your paper, I found that, for example, when you predicted risk for criminality, it explained 1% approximately, if I read correctly, 1% of variation in criminality. So I think that when we are talking about this kind of associations that we have, for example, child at home at some year, and then 20 years later something happens and it explains 1% of the variation. So it's I would be definitely cautious when talking about causal effect, because at the beginning of your presentation you said that we found causal effects, and that's definitely, I'm so terrified for all those mothers, because I have been contacted by so many mothers who have asked me that, okay, will my child be criminal? And it's a real concern. We can't like ignore it. So I want to emphasize for everyone that it's an association and the explanatory power was actually minimal, I think. But of course, important research, and thank you for this, but I just want to emphasize this.
Well, I think that there's a slight misunderstanding about the research methods here. So R squared is not something that we use to study whether something is causal or not. We include a lot of fixed effects in the model that sort of capture a lot of the variation, and maybe too deep here, but when we say that the results we think are causal, that comes from studying the kind of event studies that I showed, that we look at what's the marginal impact of these policy changes. So we are quite confident that we are still talking about causal effects. But if you want to say something to these concerned moms, you can say that as I also tried to say during my presentation just now, is that the level of criminality is like 4% in municipalities on average. That increases with paying slightly more home care allowance by 0.5 percentage point. So it doesn't mean that if they are concerned that all children would become criminals, that's not what our result says. It just says that there's this marginal effect, but it's still there. It's statistically significant, and we think it's causal. So it's still, when it comes to interpreting what is the impact of this policy, we rather wouldn't want to see this kind of negative effect. We wouldn't want to introduce any policies that increase criminality.
Just to make things a little bit more clear, so if we are talking about causal effects, maybe you could explain what are the mechanisms here. So it's like, what is causing, like how home care allowance and the additional municipality supplement is causing bad like test outcomes and long-term increased criminality. What is the mechanism there? Like, how does that happen? Like, I guess you have a theory about that, which is not in the empirical study.
Yeah, it's not in the empirical study because I really don't want to speculate with something that we cannot prove with data. But so apparently the mechanism can be either one of the two, according to our results, which is that for 1-year-old child, it seems that it would improve their outcomes if they are at least part day in daycare instead of all day in home care, or that the other possibility is that there's this, we also find this kind of longer term negative effect on the labor employment careers and earnings of moms, so of course that can also influence the children also later on. So we cannot kind of very confidently say which one it is, but then you might have asked kind of deeper level mechanisms that what is it could be about daycare or what could it be about this family level income effect. So based on our results, I cannot say, and maybe that would be a better job for maybe, for example, psychologists to answer about those. But I can't say that based on our study, so I don't want to speculate.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we should just go like in order. Essi, do you have questions or comments, initial ones?
Yeah, well, maybe I mean, Aino's question kind of answered my question in a way, because you use the registered data of children. It's from 1988 to 2019. So it's a very long period of data, because when I was looking at the statistics about the use of the home care allowance, there is a certain degrees in the usage of the home care allowance, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I've and you researchers of course know better, but that there seemed to be this tendency that mothers with lower education seem to be using it proportionally more than mothers with higher education, and then mothers under the age of 25 use it more and longer than mothers above the age of 30. So this probably has an impact on the outcome of your study, but maybe it was kind of already answered with I know asked.
I would actually like to emphasize that the descriptives that you explained are true, that there's significant differences in how much mothers with different educational background, for example, use home care allowance. But then maybe an interesting question is, on top of that observation, is to study the marginal effect. What's the impact of the home care allowance? And I was actually quite surprised that the marginal effect for, say, quite highly educated moms is still quite significant, so that they also did respond to the monetary incentives in their by staying at using the home care allowance more. So although there's clear differences in the usage, it's still what we are interested in is the kind of marginal effect of how the variation affects these decisions. And so if we make this thought experiment, for example, that we would completely remove this home care allowance system, there would still be different amounts of moms from different backgrounds who would stay at home taking care of their children, and they would then maybe use some other benefits than home care allowance, but they would still not all be employed, even in the absence of this system. And so maybe the usage of home care allowance in different, like the differences in different groups, might reflect this underlying tendency to stay at home taking care of children also.
Thank you. Elina?
Yes, thank you. My first issue with this article is that it's not pre-reviewed. So I think that the political implications that you gave out of it, the communication of the article, was a way too brave in taking into the consideration that being a social scientist, I must say that there may be tens and dozens and hundreds of different mechanisms that have affected the things that you are looking into, especially when we talk about the children. I must say that it doesn't convince me at all that it was the municipal supplement that caused it, and zero convinced to that it was the home care allowance system, because you were looking into, in all the other municipalities, you had the home care allowance system in use, and the children were doing okay. I know you told me that the mothers in these municipalities stayed at home more, but I think the effect can be that these municipalities with the supplement actually get more mothers to move into the municipalities that are yksinhuoltaja. Single mothers, or mothers with low education, or mothers that are pretty young when the child is born. I think there are also effects in municipalities that may affect the employment of the families. For example, if there's a factory that is closed down, etc. I mean, so many effects that you cannot control, and you are only looking into one effect, and that is the supplement. And I want in your communication that you concentrate on the supplement and not the whole system. Because talking about the whole home care allowance system and its effects on children, it's not fair. It's not based on this article. I agree with you that the municipal supplements are problematic because we pay mothers quite a lot to stay at home. And I do agree with you that when the child is of age of 2 or 3, it is in his best interest to go to early education. I think it's problematic that some municipalities pay the supplement only for families that keep all the siblings at home. There are many things I agree with you on, but I think that it is way too direct to say that it is the municipal supplement that is increasing youth crime, that is actually making the children move to not to high school as much, etc. I mean, it doesn't convince me.
Well, I think that the research team has a lot of credits to be able to say that when we think that these are causal effects, that they truly are. On the peer review part, it's kind of, it wouldn't be fair, I think, for the Finnish policy discussion to hold on and not to publish these kind of quite policy relevant results. But it has been presented in, for example, NPR Summer Institute or other very competitive conferences that kind of has a sort of form of peer review system. In order to get into those conferences, you need to have really good results and methods. So I think I did my best to try to describe what is it about the methods that we use that we think that deliver causal, that we can say based on those that the effects are causal. And so it's maybe on these states quite difficult to say more about that, but maybe I just say that me, Christina and John think that, and many audiences to which we have presented who truly understand these methods, that they are convinced that the results are describing the causal effects. And as I said already before, I think that I understand that we can't say about the whole home care allowance system, but we can say quite confidently what's the role of the monetary variation in home care allowance, which is of course a big part of the whole thing, because in essence the home care allowance is monetary supplement. So saying results about what's the role of the monetary supplement, then pretty much describes what is the effect of the home care allowance.
I'll just return to the initial discussion we had about why municipalities are paying this supplement. But could it be related to the results you have found? Like, for example, some municipalities are, let's say, are not being able to handle the child care system well enough. And for that reason, they increase the home care allowance. And this tells you about the type of municipality you have. And maybe there is a relationship. Can we say something like that?
Well, again, I think it's very difficult to, so maybe some municipalities have, there's evidence from small subset of municipalities that they first thought that they would get children out of daycare by introducing the supplement. Then they realized it's going to be really costly after they had the supplement in place for some time, and then they changed the rules such that it was very much more restrictive rules. So then they said that we only have this supplement available for like selected group of moms or families. But that was a small subset out of the municipalities that have supplement policy. So it's again difficult for me to summarize anything about the behavior based on the evidence we have.
Okay. Elina, did you have a related point about this, or then we move to Maiju, who has a related point, I suppose?
Thank you. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Tuomas for this research. And I want to emphasize, it's really hard to design this type of research, because usually, and this applies to many other areas. For example, when we kind of think about whether we can say something about the effects of early childhood education, for example, it has the same issues, that you can't really kind of just compare children in early childhood education and outside early childhood education, because then we don't know, is there a difference at the beginning? So is there a reason why certain children go to early childhood education center and others do not? So we are not comparing maybe the similar children at all. And here we have a very similar problem, which you have kind of, to me, very beautifully solved. And as far as I know, this is a very state-of-art type of methodology. But then it's really hard to kind of, as you said, it's hard to say what is the actual cause of these results. But what I find interesting in these results is that in Finland, we have had, from the beginning of this home care allowance system, very strong belief that home care is the kind of should be priority and is supreme way of providing care for children for a very young age. And this clearly shows that that's not necessarily the truth. We can't say really whether early childhood education is better than home care. I think that we have many studies showing that there are different kinds of routes that can be good for children, and that is something I'd like to, we continue keeping up this discussion that different routes can be good for children. And maybe this is kind of something I'd like to take from this research.
Thank you. Thank you. This also relates to the next thing I want to discuss. So, as I said, I've been reading the news, and there were complaints about this perspective. Someone said economics hijacking the policy discussion and leaving everything else out. For example, child psychology, educational perspective, mental health of children, topics like these, like commenters say that these should be taken into account when discussing policy issues. And I'm guessing that many of you will agree with this point, and I want to go on discussing this, like what are the policy implications of this research and related research, and what kinds of other perspectives do we have to take into account if we were to design a successful policy for Finland and for other countries. So shall we start with you, Aino?
Thank you. I think that one viewpoint that is necessary to take into consideration is that we are now talking about a single study. And of course, this is very important single study and very, very great statistical techniques and etc. But we have hundreds of studies on comparing children at home care and in center-based care. And there are also many other domains of development that were not investigated in this single good study. For example, this study did not investigate the effect of a maternal full-time job with mother's mental well-being. There is evidence that, for example, if a mother goes to full-time work very soon after childbirth, it predicts higher depressive symptoms, stronger feelings of stress, scheduling stress, etc. And then also we know that if a child is at the center-based care, then if the group size is too big, if the caregivers are changing all the time, there are substitute workers or non-educated caregivers, then the children have a higher risk for example, disruptive behavior or emotion regulation difficulties. And such domains of development were outside the scope of this study, but they also need to be taken into consideration. And I think that I have been thinking about this home care system because actually I think that in Finland we have such a discussion culture that I sometimes hear, not always and not today, but sometimes I have heard such comments that child should go away from his parents and it's better to be anywhere else than at home. And we know the most fundamental principle in developmental psychology is that the child-parent relationships lays the foundation for child development. And independently of where the child is, the relationship with parents, it's very important. And child really needs his or her parents to develop normally. And we should not create some impressions that parents are a threat for children. I really hope that we appreciate the work that also parents do at home. If I have still 10 seconds time to talk, I have been thinking that here we are talking that we are paying money to mothers at home and whether it's too big amount of money. But let's take an example. If a person takes a foster child, so some other child, he or she is paid 2,000 euros per month per child. If someone takes 2 foster children to rear, he gets even more. And the amounts of money are quite much bigger if taking care of someone other's child. And then also, I know some cases, where two families have had many children, for example, 6 children, and they have changed their children during the day, and then called it family care, so that they take care of neighbors' children with each other, and then they get more money for that. So in Finland, we have such weird situations where sometimes it feels that taking care of own children is not appreciated on the basis of money, but then taking care of anyone other's children, it's more appreciated. Also, of course, in the child care centers, there are these workers from morning to evening who take care of the children, and that's extremely important work. And I think that we should appreciate this work, whether it occurs at home or wherever.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we are discussing the policy implications of this type of research, and we could even we could assume that the results are correct, and even if you have doubts about it, we could just assume that these results are correct. But how to translate this into policy? That seems to be a different problem, more complicated problem, because of some of the reasons Aino mentioned. And so maybe Maiju had something to add to that?
Sure. Well, it's a difficult question, I must admit. So what I think would be important, what Elina already kind of brought up earlier, is to kind of try to think whether those municipality supplements kind of whether we can think a little bit differently with those, as they often include criteria, for example, that you need to take care of all of the children under school age in your family at home. So this kind of creates a situation where you kind of give money to the parents to kind of avoid also children from 3 to 5 not to go to early childhood education and care. So that is something we might want to consider. And the other thing is that maybe we should kind of start thinking about really separating home care allowance and attendance to early childhood education and care, to kind of not to think them just as an opposite kind of options. So could it be possible to use early childhood education and care part-time, and then or kind of some of the days of the week to kind of reduce the stress maybe experienced in the families? Because we know from the research that our system is kind of, we have this discourse of choice that we kind of allow parents to choose, but that's actually not the case when we empirically look at the situation. So there are families who would like their children to take part in early childhood education and care, but at the current situation, it's impossible for them for several reasons. And home care allowance is not the only thing we need to discuss. There are other kinds of obstacles, such as distances, for example, and kind of other types of issues. But maybe kind of, can we start kind of thinking these a little bit differently, would be my question.
Okay. Would you like to comment immediately on that, or?
Well, for that I can also say that I think that we it would be good to think about what it does for children if they attend early education early on, and kind of how to encourage that independent of other policies. So that's a good point. I also wanted to highlight from the overall sort of, if you start to think about the whole policy issue here, or the whole spectrum, we have this one idea that what we want to do is to give financial support to families, or even to all families with children, maybe in order to encourage the how child positive society Finland is. So that's one aspect that we want to do. Then there's this idea of with home care allowance of precisely targeting this one subsidy to those who are at home care, and that I don't know if it's that's a great idea. So maybe if it just would kind of blow up the system and design a new one, we would make sure that we give enough financial support to all those in need, but it is not so directive to home care. Mm-hmm. So I think that's in some sense slightly old-fashioned idea to think that we should kind of target home care so heavily. So that kind of system would allow those families that want to take care of their children at home to do so, but that's that if they would instead want to now to go back to being employed, then the system wouldn't kind of create strong incentives against that. So that would be sort of my policy recommendation.
Okay, so I was going to come back to this, like if you had to design a system, what would it be? Question in the end, but Tuomas already presented his system. Yeah. But I want to hear more from Essi and Elina, and particularly from Essi, because she perhaps knows best the practical constraints when you need to design a policy. And what would they be? Like, would removing the home care allowance system easy in this complex system, which is very much connected? What obstacles do you see? And
yeah, I think. Thank you, and I think that. Well, now we focus on home care allowance, and as your first question on why is it so much debated today, but it's just one part of our whole social security system, but it shows maybe the challenges that we have in our society. I think one of them is that our labor market is very on-off. Like you mentioned, it's very unique in the European Union. I have my background actually in international social security law, so I worked for a long time with the different European social security systems, and Finland is very special in that respect, that our labor market is very strict. You have to work 100% or nothing, and there are different situations in life where it might be better to have this flexibility to maybe work part-time. There are maybe and also other situations than those where you take care of your child. I think this was really interesting, this what you said, Maiju, about this flexibility also with the combining different forms. I'm not saying this is something we could do, but maybe this idea of introducing more possibilities to choose what is best for the families. And I must say that I'm a bit worried when we say that, yes, well, we have to, that the only reason to keep the home care allowance is that, yes, we have that families would have the right to choose. But I don't think the system as it is now, and it's not because of the home care allowance, it's because of our whole society and the wage gap between men and women, and our segregated labor market, which is the most segregated in the whole of Europe. So these are reasons why they all then we pinpoint at the home care allowance system, that because there aren't these as many possibilities of families actually to live a life where they could maybe choose different ways of doing, and it wouldn't be dependent on whether you are the father or the mother, and that then society would like step by step come to a state where it would be more dependent on your personal abilities or interests and so on. And then I would just like to mention, I think it's also important to have this economic debate when we talk about social security and reforming our social security system, because we have to have a sustainable system. And one of the issues is that we know from research and statistics that child poverty is at the highest when parents are not working. So we need to increase, to decrease child poverty, we need to increase the level of parents working. And well, there are many challenges in that respect, and one is that for one reason or another, the labor market is very strict with not allowing people who can't work full time in the labor market. This is maybe one point. Yeah.
Thank you. You have a comment on that?
Yeah, just to add on that, one interesting thing is that when we interview parents who take care of their children at home and the reasons for that, one of the main reasons is actually that they want to have a break from the work. And the recent survey was actually kind of, the researchers were surprised that actually it wasn't the quality of the childhood education parents were worried about. And when we see the international comparisons, early childhood education in Finland actually is a rather good quality, both in terms of process quality, so what's happening in the interaction between adults and children, and also like a structural level, so qualification requirements and so on. Of course, we all know from the news what's happening in certain municipalities. That's obviously not the whole story in the whole country. But I think that's important, that we need to kind of also think about what to do with the working life, not only what to do with the services.
Thank you. You had a point about this?
I have two small short points.
Okay.
The first is that I have, in some countries, I have heard that they have an innovative solution, so that at workplaces they have childcare centers, so that parents can go to work and then have a lunch with their children in another room. So they can really closely combine work and being with the children. And for example, the child may be sleeping in another room, and then parent is working in another room. So I think something like that would be really nice. I'm not sure whether it's really realistic, but it sounds very good. and then I would like to say the other point that is very short, that I think that the biggest problem in the center-based care is now that the well-being of the workers is so low. We have alarming rates of depressive symptoms and burnout, work stress there. And actually I compared statistics so that a child is more likely to encounter a depressed or burnout adult in child care than at home, because their depression rates are higher than parents' depression rates. So this also needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay. So my short comment on this, and then we move to Elina.
Yeah, just a short comment to this suggestion about having those early childhood education centers related to workplaces, which kind of sounds wonderful idea, and there has been kind of some pilots related to that, but it also kind of has this problem of segregation, so it kind of then causes certain children to concentrate on certain certain centers. So Kaarina Hazard, journalist and writer and author in Finland, has kind of beautifully said that the kind of the power of kind of a Finnish system is that children from different socioeconomic background come to the early childhood education center, and they put their fingers to the same kind of pain pot to do something together. So that would kind of break that type of ideal we've had in the Finnish system. So children from different environments come together. But there's obviously the issue of segregation of urban areas in kind of more larger sense that causes that as well.
Thank you. Elina, I want to return back to this different perspectives issues.
Yes, I think I go back half an hour because I'm surprised you say that in Finland we have this ideology of children being taken care of at home. I see total opposite. I know you have been, Tuomas, writing the strategy for increasing the involvement of children in early education. And in that paper it says that we have to do everything there is to do for the children to join early education. And I see this pressure a lot harder than the pressure of taking care of children at home. I also think that we have a huge pressure of getting the mothers work quite quickly after giving birth, and that you could see with this reform on the parental leave reform, that the sort of pressure to have the mothers work as quickly as possible was quite big, and I think it took a lot of discussion to make it possible for the other parents to give 63 days to the other. So I'm not that worried about this ideology of keeping children at home. I want to return to this: how should we change the system, the home care allowance system, and what would be the ideal way of building it? The thing that worries me, because I understand research and I've read it, and I know that there are problems in this system where the sort of incentive of staying at home is so big that the mothers actually made a profession out of it. And this is where the immigrant mothers that I don't want to concentrate on. I want to concentrate on the mothers with low education, probably young age, etc., that continue staying at home, probably the whole work career. When you look at the municipal supplements, the kuntalisä community union, what is it? Last year just did a research on the municipal supplements, and there were 50 municipalities that actually pay it. Of those, 82.4 have these sort of criteria for getting it. And half of them assume that all the children are taken care of at home. 47% say that the parent has to take care of the child, etc. So there are like these mechanisms, even in the supplement, that are problematic. And I would really like to concentrate on the supplement. How can we reduce the negative effects of that, instead of talking about the whole home care allowance system, because that makes the discussion complicated, because your research wasn't about that. Also, the thing I want to say is that if we are so worried about the immigrant mothers, why don't we pay them some incentive for them to take their children into early education?
Okay, Maiju?
And I'm totally agree with Elina that immigrant mothers aren't the issue here, as we know that actually their enrollment rate of the children from immigrant background families is actually rather large when they turn 3, if I remember correctly. So that's not the group I'm worried about. And there is definitely kind of a change in the discourse, as you kind of now describe that kind of, and this is a reaction to the earlier discourse we've had in relation to which is kind of prior. Should we kind of prioritize home care, or should we prioritize early childhood education and care? And it kind of happens at 2012. And we don't want to go the another kind of side of the pendulum to kind of that we are arguing that all of the children need to go to early childhood education and care. And kind of I really want to highlight and emphasize that we really kind of need to understand that there are different ways, different kind of paths, but we really kind of want to kind of avoid the segregation this system now causes.
Thank you. Tuomas?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that immigrant mothers can be kind of a group that policy could focus somehow. I agree on that. But then again, it's good to remember that there's some over 80% of mothers who use home care allowance, and our results speak to that group. So it's much larger group of moms than the narrow group of immigrant moms, and so it would be very bad to not to take heed of seeing very negative results of this home care allowance in policy making somehow. So that they might show that there must be something wrong with the system if it produces this kind of outcomes, even if we don't know about the full scope of it, of the system. So I think it's important to realize that the role of you can design policy in different ways, and in this home care allowance you have decided to even name it home care allowance and to somehow incentivize people to stay at home. And you could, if you think what's the underlying policy goals, you might have achieved those without having home care allowance, or some of them at least.
Thank you. We are slowly running out of time. So if you agree, let's go one round and give our clearest message to our listeners. What should we take from this panel discussion home? What would be your final thoughts and message? So let's go in order, starting with Aino.
I would have needed a bit more time, but actually I would like to add one comment. Let's take it as my final message also, that if we aim to increase participation of immigrant children in center-based care, we must consider that research has shown that immigrant children need higher quality care to adapt there. So if we have such problems that we have too big groups and changing caregivers and etc., noise levels, high noise levels, immigrants are more likely to suffer from such features. It has been shown because they have weaker language abilities. They may have more emotional problems or difficulties. So they are at higher need for stable caregivers and stable group. And if we aim to add their proportion there, we first need to increase the quality of the childcare so that they better adapt there.
Okay, that's the part of the equation as far as I can understand, quality of childcare. Essi, what are your final comments?
Well, I think we have to have a holistic view about reforming our system. And I think that one of the big challenges in our society is that there are gaps in female labor market participation. And this also, what happens is that then we also have more poverty amongst the female pensioners because they have interruptions in their working career. So whatever measures we take, I think we should take this into consideration. But having said that, I completely agree that we have to have the children's best interest in our minds. And coming back to the social security reform, let's see what the new government decides, how it will continue. But the Social Security Committee during the last government, or this government still period, made concluded that there should be an overhaul made, or like overhaul evaluation of the childcare subsidies, and that in the framework that this should ensure that children have access to quality early childhood education, and also to allow parents to return from family leave to work with a safe mind. So this is one conclusion from the Social Security Committee. And I think we have to have in mind decreasing child poverty and to combat marginalization and segregation of the society. So these are maybe the main issues I would like to stress.
Elina?
Yes, from the point of the view of the child, it is exactly so that we have to keep the child's best interest in mind. I want to say that the research shows that good quality care, whether it is given at home or at early education, is good for the child. There is no difference when you look and follow the impact on the development of the child. If the quality is bad, whether it is at home or in early education, the effects can be negative, and we need more good care to compensate that. I would like to actually give my message to, yes, I'm worried about the labor markets as well, but I'm more worried about our birth rate. We don't have this problem soon anymore because we won't be having children here. And children have become like the privilege of the elite. And we are going to have more and more working academic women having children, and less non-academic men having children. And this is something we have to think about. We don't want to change the system thus that we have less and less people having children. And that is a quality issue as well, because we know that many people dream of having kids and they cannot fulfill these dreams. But I also have a message to the economists. As you are so good in making these quasi-experimental systems, please look into the child protection system as well. What are the effects, the negative effects of that system on families and children? That would be really interesting. And I think you could also find some mechanisms that actually explain these results as well.
Thank you. Maiju?
I think one of the things that hasn't been raised yet is that I think we need more of these forums where we can discuss these multidisciplinary forums, where we can kind of first explain what the research is about and then come together and think. And I really thank Emrah for making this possible for us. I've really enjoyed this discussion. The other point is that I really kind of hope that we as a society understand that these policies are not neutral. They really kind of give also the message to the parents that what kind of choices or what kind of arrangements are culturally acceptable. And this is very important to think when we design policies.
Thank you. Tuomas?
Well, I think that maybe the overall message is that so it's when we think about these home care or daycare choices and what kind of policies we would like to design regarding them, I think it's important to respect individual choices. So if people want to stay at home care, nobody is sort of taking that away. But it's also important to design policies in a way that they don't create more negative effects in the society. And I think I still sort of want to point out that our results show that the current system creates some negative effects. So that it would be ideal to take these into account in policy design. But there's many things we don't know, and clearly these are very of great interest. So there's things about childcare quality or segregation or what to do with immigrants. So what we actually, Elina, don't want to stop with quasi-experiments. We would like to do randomized experiments where we truly would be able to say what is the impact and how we then could design better policies nationwide.
Thank you. I would like to devote the last minutes to audience questions. So we had an online audience. Maybe they have some questions. So Anita.
Yeah, there were several nice questions from online audience. I'm thinking that time-wise, what would be the best one to start with? But perhaps I will start with the one questioning about this. Was about well, there were several questions to Tuomas about the research in itself. So question concerns that one of the main reasons why people decided to stay at home was to take a break from working life. So was this only about women? And did this have something to do with the educational level of women? And also there was a question concerning that how are these did you categorize your results according to socioeconomic variables?
Okay, maybe I answered the last one first because that's something I can answer, which is that we did also look at heterogeneity in results according to mom's education and also the level of family income before the child was born. And it was, I kind of hinted at earlier already that it was sort of surprising that the results weren't that heterogeneous. So there's actually many results from, say, Norway or Germany that tend to show that the negative effects of home care are greater in low socioeconomic status families. But so regarding those other studies, in this case, it was sort of surprising to see that we found quite similar effects independent of socioeconomic status or the education level of the mom. So then I cannot say what's the underlying reason why moms in general want to stay at home care, because our results are not about that. It's about the role of monetary incentives. So that's something that goes into all sorts of other things that we don't observe and don't even try to explain in this study.
Perhaps I will ask here, perhaps as an additional question to that, because there was also a question concerning that how did you treat the role of vocational high school in this research and the priority set for academic high school over vocational high school? Would you like so that so it looks that sometimes that vocational high school was almost equated together with dropping out of a high school altogether. So what was so the question was here that what was the decision? Why did you do it like this?
I maybe didn't fully understand the question, but what we did as the outcome was define such that we have whether or not the child goes to academic high school as one, and then as opposite of that, whether the child instead goes to vocational high school, and with that we group together also with whether the child drops out. And this was done, the merging the vocational and dropping out. There were not too many dropping out, but we put them together just in order to have like 1-0 variable to look at. So it was academic high school versus something else.
Thank you. Elina, would you like to say something?
No, I can say it later if we have time, because it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Okay, so
I was just thinking that we haven't been talking about the fathers at all, and I think one solution to this problem could be that probably we should pay fathers to stay at home.
Well, I mentioned the fathers
Yeah,
quite
did.
many times,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, but I think that would be like the children would get to stay at home with their parents, but the fathers would, and that would have good effect on labor markets as well.
maybe we have questions from the live audience. There's one question from here. Just a second. Microphone is coming.
Hello. Yeah, just had a curious, or rather a comment on one of the slides where you'd use the term penalized. So it was like, how much did the wage of, let's say, the mom drop in relation to the husband or the dad? And then the term penalized was used, and I thought that's a very curious formulation where two people in a family are not seen as individuals in a single unit, but they're pitted in a competition against each other, where if one of them starts to earn less euros, then that's seen as a penalty for that person, rather than, oh, there's a gain for the child, that they were exposed more to their mom. So
Yeah, I agree, it's a strong term, but I only merely used the term that has been used extensively in the prior literature, so I didn't come up with the term.
Hi, I'm Rasmus, and I have a more boring question for this. So the question is about the migration effect and its potential danger to Sutva assumptions. And like, I think one thing that might be against this hypothesis is that because we see these happenings quite fast, but usually in the literature, if we have migration for financial reasons, it takes a couple of years to ramp up. So it will not be so dangerous for this kind of setup. But anyways, my question for Tuomas is, would it be still interesting to study the effects of migration on these young families of these policies, and some other possible robustness checks, for example, dropping all the movers or something?
Yes, you're correct that it would be important and interesting to look at. So I actually published already 2014 this the first study on the effects of these municipal supplements. Then only on mom's short-term labor outcomes, and there I also looked at whether the municipal supplement introductions influence people to move across to different municipalities. But I found flat zero, so it turns out that maybe as you pointed out, that maybe the moving decisions take more time to immediately react to them, and maybe the kind of the supplement variation is not big enough for people to move. Typically, people also have like just two spouses, and you need to kind of consider the job location as well, and so forth. But empirically, the answer is that it's good to check, but didn't find an migration effect.
Thank you. I was thinking that 2 hours would be enough to discuss this, but I was completely wrong. I think there are so many things to discuss and to go into the detail, but unfortunately we cannot do that today. I hope you all agree that this was very informative. It was very informative for me. I hope the audience also agrees with this. So I would like to thank all of our panelists for being here today. And I'd like to thank the RESES team for doing this possible. And I'd like to, of course, thank the Finnish Cultural Foundation for funding this kind of activity. I would like to announce 2 things, and then I will end the panel discussion. On Friday, we have another panel discussion, which is on the 4-day working week, which will be a part of a workshop on growth. It will be in Metsatalo. So you are very welcome to join that discussion as well. And next Friday, on the 9th of June, we will have Ha Yon Chang, this famous economist, who will be giving one of our Argumenta distinguished lectures. So you are welcome to that talk too. So I'd like to thank you all, the audience, the panelists, and our team once again. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Emrah.